are being recorded. So we're recording now. So welcome to the session of Kubernetes Book Club on the CNCF. Today is September 15, and we've been doing the KubeBuilder book. The information is on the link I provided in the chat. Go ahead and add your names if you're here. You can use suggestions. Just suggest here. I'll take some notes on some of the folks I see here. But then the other folks can just add it and then I'll accept it. So just add it there. And then for news, we'll go quickly because I think we have a lot of things to cover today. The next week, we're going to have 7 sessions on acing the CKA exam by Chad Crower. He is the book author, and actually today is one of the days that you can buy the book. I think he told me is 45% off. So if you buy the book today, I mean, if you're watching this recorded, join the Slack, because we're going to have coupons. There might be like 20% or I don't know what percent, but today is the cheaper. So I'm going to buy it also today. So we're going to do this. Acing the CKA exam is a book that came out this month, September 2023. Chad is the book author, and also he joins the book club. So he's going to be hosting some of the sessions. So we go chapter by chapter, and definitely he's going to kick off next week with the first 2 chapters. I think there's 9 chapters. We're going to try to do it from now to KubeCon Chicago. So the challenge is to get as much as people possible to register the exam. Maybe register now for maybe December or the holiday break. That way you have something like you have like an incentive to like study for the next 2 months, and then in December take the test, take the CKA exam if you don't have it, or if you need to renew it. So Chad is going to do hands-on sessions on CKA. I think I might take one of the sessions, and then Eric and Sevi is going to take two more sessions. So we'll have different folks doing CKA. Anyone wants to do the CKA or needs to renew the CKA?
Yeah, I'm planning.
I'm learning. I'm still learning for this.
You said that you want to take it?
Yes.
Yep. So great. So if you join us for the next couple of weeks, you should be able to pass. Like, that's the promise of this book, is acing the CKA exam. And then we'll do kind of a challenge. I'll try to get some giveaways. I don't know if it's going to be free copies of the book or maybe free training of the free exam. We'll ask the CNCF what they can donate, and then we'll have a raffle or something like that. But I should have more details next week when Chat joins on it. But this will be the next book. So I'm very excited on this, because a lot of people been asking me tips on the CKA exam. So that's for next week. That's the big announcement. There's a link to a doc that I created, kind of like what's going with the schedule and the sessions. So I'll do one. Chat will do most of them. He's the book author. So this is the first time a book author is hosting a Kubernetes book club. So I'm super excited about that. The next thing is the co-located events for KubeCon NA are posted online. I have a talk in ArgoCon, App Developer Con, but there's also IstioCon, Multi-Tenancy Con. There's a bunch of co-located events. And if you cannot attend, these are getting recorded and they're available in YouTube as always, like even the from last KubeCon. KCD Texas is on October 6th. there's still tickets available. So if you want to attend, go ahead and get your tickets. And then for today, this is not the topics for today. The topics for today are, I think I posted them in Slack. So we're going to cover why the validation webhooks were not working last week, how to deal with, maybe talk a little bit what to do when you have an invalid custom resource in the store in etcd, and then suddenly you add validation and conversions, and then that CR gets stuck. Multi-version for controllers and CRDs when you're going from V1 to V2. Prometheus to collect metrics from these controllers. And the last one, I found yesterday that there's a Grafana plugin that KubeBuilder actually gives you like a Grafana dashboard, generates a Grafana dashboard specific to your for the controller. So that's a nice to have. Any news from folks that they want to share? Or what's going on probably next week or soon? So we have a few more people joining. That's good. And okay, so if there's nothing else, we'll get started. I'm using DevBot. Is my favorite utility right now to get an environment up. So usually I just click a button. All my environment is configured as dev containers, the same thing as GitHub Spaces. And then I have it in AWS, but you can have it in Docker, and it will open native VS Code. So if I open this, all my environment is up and running in VS Code, but everything's running in a VM that auto shuts down, so I don't have to worry about my Mac getting slow or not having enough memory to run things. So we'll give it a second, and then we'll come up. And these are the links to follow along and get DevBot, or the files that we're working is in the Google Doc. So this is opening VS Code. I have all my plugins in here, and this is how I left it last time I was using it. And we are doing, which section I was doing last week? We were working with webhooks. So let me see, what's the problem with webhooks? I think I have it here. Revalidate. So yeah, I am the first problem that I had. Let me see where in what chapter. So we did this. We have the environment up. So if I do get pods -a, I have kind working, and we have cert manager. We did that, and then we deploy the controller. So our controller is running here, including the webhooks. So we did this piece. We created a kind cluster. One thing that I did is this section. I added make install, and to install the CRDs, and make deploy will deploy to the local cluster. So you can copy this. So anytime you want to deploy, you deploy with that, and then everything works. So we did this part. We added cert manager. We added the batch jobs, but it wasn't. And we did the tests, so I can run. I don't know if I show this here. I can do make test. That's running our tests that we looked at last time, which they're located. So if you're new to this session, we're doing a KubeBuilder, the tutorials that they have with the cron job. The directory structure is divided, like the CMD has our main.go, is the main entry to our controller. The APIs are defined under /API folder, v1. And then under config is our CRDs that are being generated, the YAML files. And then internal controller is actually where we put the code and the test. So this is the testing that is running. And if we follow the book, let's see. This is the testing part. And then that's done. So I'll show. Last time the problem that validation wasn't working was because in the cron job webhook, there's a function to validate that, for example, if we put something wrong in the cron syntax. So there's this function that validates the cron job name, the spec. When we go to the spec, it validates the schedule. So this is the example. So when you put the schedule, it's using the valid cron syntax. So if I try to deploy under config samples this, and I put something here that is invalid, that is not a cron syntax, invalid cron, and I give it a name of like invalid. Last time it was letting it go through, and it was not checking like this is a valid cron syntax. So if I do the control is running with the webhook. So if I do k apply -f config samples batch v1, that one, it should give us an error. So now it's giving us an error that the cron job sample, our code is running. Where's it's giving us this error saying that invalid value, invalid cron, expected 5 fields, which is minutes, hours, and so on and so on. So it's giving us error, so it's not letting us. So that's running our webhook. The Kube API server is calling our webhook, doing the validation and returning this error here. So last time it worked and we didn't know why. So it's because I think we didn't copy the code. The code was just scaffold, the empty one. So I copied the one that was in the book. So that's the first thing that we did. Let me see if I go here. So that's that. The other part is if you had, I don't think I have it, but if you were to insert something that is invalid, didn't have the validation, and then suddenly you add validation or you add conversion, actually maybe conversion, it's taking out something from etcd will go through these conversions webhooks and they will not work. But for that, let's look at multiversion. So the next, so that's the end of this tutorial. If you follow along, we did the whole build cron job example, all the way of like deploying it, cert manager, webhooks, writing tests, and that. So the next section is multi-version API. So for multi-version API, basically is our API is, I'll put this one back like it was. It was like this. So our API is V1. So let's say that we want to create a V2 that instead of specifying the schedule like this, it specified the schedule like in a structured format. So in the book, that's basically what it's saying, that we go from this format and we want to do it in a more structured way, like schedule and then specify minute, hour, and so on. So for that, you will run this command, which I did, and that would create a scaffold V2. So I'm not going to do it because I already did it, but I'm going to show what it did. So it created this new folder with V2, API V2, And it has the cron job types. So it told us to change this to, instead of V1, actually V2 was created with V2. And then the syntax, instead of having the old one, is going to have a structure one. So we're going to have a structure schedule. So in the other one, if we compare, let's say, V1 to V2, they should look very similar. So one says V1, the other one says V2. And then this one is a string. So we're going from a string to a structure, like an object. And the type is scrum schedule. Move this a little bit here. And Scrum schedule, we put it at the bottom as a structure that is going to be a field called minutes, a field hour, day of the month, and then day of the week. That's how Cron works. So this is maybe an example of you're creating a better version of your CRD, that instead of asking people to remember that syntax of cron, which sometimes I myself forget, like date of the month versus the month or day of the week, you have a structure like minutes, date of the month, explicit, and that may be a better user experience. So you're creating your V2. But this section of the book, what is teaches you, for you to learn, is how do I go for deploying a controller that a lot of people were deploying already these CRs using the CRD v1, and now you have a new version. So how do you write one single controller that can handle v1 and v2? And that's a common question that a lot of people ask when like working with CRDs, like how do I upgrade to the new version while maintaining backwards compatibility and also converting, still taking in v1 as valid, but I also take v2 as valid. Or if I create something with v2 and I want to extract the v1 version of it, you can do kubectl get and ask for the v1 version of it, and you will get the v1 even though you created with v2, which is kind of like a very foundation promise of Kubernetes when you're working with the Kubernetes API in terms of programmatically, not the humans, but programmatically, that maybe you have integration with that Kubernetes cluster, that your code is always requesting resources in v1 structure. So you expect the structure to come back like v1, like this, and not v2. And then, but even if it got created as v2, so that is the backwards compatibility that comes with designing CRDs and Kubernetes APIs. So I'll stop there for kind of like the theory, but that's what basically what the book was explaining in terms of that. And this is the part that is any questions? I see Eric join. Who else joined? See, Ben, was he already?
Yeah, sorry I'm late. I'm having to multitask today.
Not a problem. So the thing is storage version. So when you have two versions of your CRD, you don't have two CRDs. You have one CRD, and you support two versions for that one CRD, V1 and V2. And when it gets stored in etcd in the database, it needs to be stored as a single version. So you need in your code, you have to indicate how you're going to, you can store it as v2, but usually you want to store it as v1 because the things that are already in storage are the previous one. And some folks, as they move like from alpha, beta, v1, v2, v3, they have installation kind of like hooks or jobs that when you install the controller, they will go and kind of like get them and then get them back so they can get stored in a version. So when you actually remove, not even deprecate a version, then you no longer have that code about conversion, but you know for sure that when you installed it through the Helm chart or through an operator, Red Hat operator, you did the conversion of things that were sitting in etcd, your last conversion. In etcd, convert it from the version that you were going to delete to the new version, and that's how that's one of the reasons when you work with Kubernetes APIs or Kubernetes itself, it asks you to move to not jump versions, because then you might need to install the next version, the next version, and the next version, because they might be upgrade jobs that will help you convert those versions stored in etcd to the next version. Very, very important in terms of, and this is like for a person that is a DevOps person, this knowledge is useful for a person like is installing these controllers and upgrading these controllers to know this, that they should not be jumping versions when you install something like, I don't know, Istio, Cert Manager, or whatever is your controller that you are installing.
Hey Carlos, I have one doubt on similar lines. So eventually, even when we update the versions of Kubernetes clusters, it is advised that we do not jump the minor versions.
Yep.
We can probably jump the fetch version probably.
Yep.
Is this something similar to that?
Yep, exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. That think of it that you are creating new APIs on top of Kubernetes, but you're adding them. But Kubernetes come with APIs already. So when you were asking about the Kubernetes version, I think we have some noise. Let me put. I need to make Eric moderator. Yeah, it's the same thing. If you do, it's for this. If you do get API resources, I'm going to show you where you find that information. Here it is. So you can see that for you have your V1s, you have this type of thing. So it's talking about the Kubernetes APIs that come embedded in Kubernetes. So it's the same process that you have to watch out of, like if something gets deprecated or not. At least in Kubernetes, when things gets, they try to have as much as backwards compatibility as possible, and that's why sometimes we don't remove anything for the longest time. And that's why you have like V alpha still running around, but not available, not being able to create them, but you'll be able to get them back. So that's why it happens when an API gets removed from Kubernetes and you still have it in etcd, you should be able to extract it in the new version. But if you try to, like your Jenkins jobs, try to do a kubectl apply or kubectl apply with the version that got removed, it would not go in. But that's what gives you the ability to have Kubernetes upgrades and still have those APIs that got removed, but they're still alive and running inside the Kubernetes cluster. It's just you need to have, now you and your pipelines need to upgrade them. So good question. So the next step is this annotation that says the storage version. So you need to select which is the one that is going to be the one used for storage version. We didn't have this line. So this is in this cronjobtypes.go. So I have a view here where I did all the changes and then I did a reset. So this is a way that we can see like what is the work that the book is telling us to do or change. So I will use this. Oh, yeah, I will use this. So if we go to V1, I think it was, yeah, I'll have it here. So I can have this on this side. We put it this side. So cron job API V1 cron job types. The things you have to change here now in V1 is like marking, like we're going to store in the etcd, everything is going to be stored using V1, even if you create it with V2. So you have to add that notation here in KubeBuilder, and that's what we did. We added that annotation that you see it here, marking this as this is the structure. So KubeBuilder would take care of generating the YAMLs and all that for that. The next step is hub and spokes. This is a good visualization that when you have multiple versions, so let's say that you have V1, like, well, here this is the example. So you have V1, I don't know if people can see what I'm pointing at. Presentation assistant. Can people see my red circle?
Yep.
Okay. So, because I'm talking with my mouse, my hands, and then people don't see that. So the idea is that in etcd, it will be stored as V1. So now when you are going to extract, you need to convert to V3 because maybe you want to, you're doing a kubectl get, you're asking for that object and you want the return to have the schema or the spec in V3, then you have to convert to V3. If you want to go from V2 to V3, is the conversion happens like you have to convert it into V1, and then from V1 convert to V3. So in terms of your coding in Go, you have to write just this method of always converting to V1 and converting from V1. So you don't have to write code of converting from V2 to V3 and then from V3 to V2, because it'll be too much complexity. So what they did here, or recommended here, most people do, is always select who's going to be your hub. That's how you're going to store it. And then in terms of writing your code, as you add V4 and V5 and all those APIs, you always convert to V1, and then from V1 to the version that you want to go to or from. That's something new that I learned. I wasn't aware of this. So this is where the webhooks are needed. It's saying here that Kube API server doesn't know how to convert your CRs from V2 to V3. It knows that it needs to call a conversion to get them converted, and then it knows how to call them. But the real work of converting one spec to another one, like going from V1 to V2, even if you remove fields, you need to be sure that this representation can go from one version to another one. You'll be writing a webhook, an API that the Kube API server would call you in terms of converting versions. So we had our validation webhook, we have the mutation webhook, and now we have our conversion webhook. So it's the third type of webhook that you'll be creating, which is also new to folks in this space, because they usually maybe be aware of mutation and validation, but not conversion. So this is like the implementation that is saying like what things you have to change in your current job conversion. So you will be creating a new file. Maybe I'll like take a look here. Current job conversion. And then you declare that this is implementing the hub. So actually they use the word hub. So they're literally using that diagram that I showed you. This becomes the hub. Everyone needs to go through this V1 to convert to and convert from. So that's why it's saying here. And then the spokes are saying that then the spokes V2 or V3 are going to write two functions: convert to, and then convert from. So if we look at the new folder, new files that we got, then in here, I think is this file, current job conversion in V2. So this one doesn't have any code because this is the hub. So there's nothing to convert. If you're going to V1, you're the hub, nothing to do. If you're in V2, then you have to implement the two functions, convert to. So if something's going from V1 to V2, then you need to assume that this is going to be V1, just assume it, and it's going to your new version. So you convert from, for example, the stars, like syntax, to the structure syntax. And then the other way around, if you implement a convert from, so you're going from V2 to V1, because that's how it's going to be stored in etcd. Then you go from the structure one, the structure information, to return a string, and that's what you save in the string. So the string becomes that part. So you return the cron field raw, right? You convert parts needed. Yeah, you convert it into that, and then that's what you return. And then the other information stays. It looks like it stays the same because you didn't change anything to the API. Only the schedule part converted from like string to a structure. So you write those two functions for convert to and convert from. Let's see what else needs to be done. And then you have to set up you have the code, but you have to set up like the API, the YAMLs. So you just run create a webhook that is type conversion for v1. So you say like, I'm going to create a conversion from v1. So that will give you the conversion webhook, like to and from v1, always calling that webhook. And it's implemented here, cron job webhook. And I think that's it. There's nothing to do here since that one was the one. So if you go to cron job webhook, cron job webhook, in v2, this is what you implement. Put it here. You implement this. This is what it says. You implement that to call your v2. So when you're dealing with v2, this is how you initiate that webhook. So it looks like, interesting. So every version, so if I create a v3, will have its conversion webhook from going from v3 to v1, from v1 to v3. And then this one is the one for v2 to v1, v1 to v2. So this is just login. So it's that in a setup webhook with manager. So this is to add a webhook to your controller, your binary that is listening, to have a slash call. And then we may see that in Prometheus metrics. So just it's a matter of adding that file. I think it may or added by the KubeBuilder. You don't have to add it. And then in the main.go, you have to add that webhook now for batch for v2, for normal webhooks, like validation and mutation and everything that is in the webhook. So in main.go, basically it looks like this, the change. You have to add, let me see if I can move this around. You just add batch v2, add the scheme, and then at the bottom, what they say here is add the setup webhook with manager. So I think this would create the 3. So it's the same thing as the v1. Yeah, so it's the same thing as the v1. V1 has the same thing. If you open cron job webhook in v1, it's the same. So it's just webhooks for the corresponding version. So if I go to cron job webhook, it has that in here. And then cron job webhook, it has that here. And then the bottom is like you're just doing conversion, so you're using the same code as before. What else? Main.go, we did it, we added it. And yeah, and testing. So it's set to, so now that you have that, is you have to edit some of the YAML files they already have it in there. So if you're going to add the patches for the cron jobs, which we already did, the customization.yaml, this is the Prometheus one, cron job here. So this got added, v2. This is an example. I think that's it. I think I don't know why it did that, because we already were doing all this. So oh, the make file. This is what's the important part. So in the make file, you have to add CRD options and then add CRD. So in the make file, you need to set up the CRD versions. By removing the trial versions, you just give it the CRDs, generate the validations for each version, instead of telling Kubernetes that there's the same. So now the validation is different. Cert manager, we have it running, and then now we can deploy it. So if you want to see it, I'm going to redeploy. It's going to stay the same, but I can run after you make your changes. You can make build. This is for kind. So this is how you build your container image. The next line is how you load it. It's running. So every time you run make Docker build, it runs make test. So that's why it's running the test, which is a good thing. Now you have V1. As you can see, V1 and V2 is building the image, and then we'll load it into Docker and then make install, make deploy. Give it a few. This should be cached. I don't know why it's taking so long. So maybe the Docker file is not optimized, because it's literally one Go file. So all this was cached, and it's just maybe compiling. Let me see if it doesn't end in the next 30 seconds, I'll kill it. But if you run it again, for me at least was fast. Okay, so I finished. Just I'm patient. You load it in kind, so there's no need to push it to a registry. Just like tell kind to load it into their internal image, and then you deploy. And in this case, I uncommented the Prometheus, and it's there. And now we can deploy. So let's deploy V2. So our deploy V2 looks like this. This is V2. Let me see if I have it. Okay, get run jobs, patch. Let me remove. Oh, let me show you that this is what's kind of cool. That you can, once you deploy it, you can deploy it with as V2, but then get it as V1. So we'll do this command, right? We'll deploy this, and now instead of the string, it's the structure one. So let me run this one. So now it's created. It's there. Let's see. So if I do, so now this is the syntax to get the V2 version of it, like being explicit. So if I just do this -o YAML, it comes out as V2, which is for usually for humans. That's what they do. They just get the V2, even though it's stored in etcd as V1. So the reason it's doing that, and there's a link, I think here, where it points like how Kubernetes does this. Let me see where it is. Maybe it's this one. It's like how using the Discovery API to know like which, if there's multiple versions that it can respond as, how does it pick the kind of the latest version or the version that you want if you don't specify. But you can be explicit in terms of if you're writing a program. So you can now do it like this, get the V2. So I'll run it here and I get the V2 version of it. This is the V2, and it has the syntax. Where's the syntax? That's V2. But I can also request the V1, and here it is. So now this thing has cron jobs v1. So when I paste it here, now I get it as v1. So if you have programs or you're writing your own program or bash scripts or anything like that, and there's an update, always use the specific version that you want to return back. If not, then that's where most of the integrations break, because they assume they're using the one for the humans, that they don't specify the version. And they mentioned that in here. So I think that was cool. So this is where it shows the talking about the different versions, and then how does it sort if you have multiple versions? How does it select where you don't specify the version that you want to return you? So in our case, it returned v2, even though we said that the default way that it's going to be stored in etcd is v1, but it didn't return v1, it returned v2 because it's doing the discovery. But like we did, we specified the specific version we want back. I think that's pretty cool. Any questions? Any comments on Slack? Let me check Slack. Okay. And we go to the next one. So that was the whole chapter. Oh my God. The whole chapter in this one is if you will store it with an invalid version, when you try to do the conversion, then you cannot get it out. So if it's invalid and the conversion is trying to do the conversion and it doesn't handle things that are invalid, you will not get that resource back ever, and stuff will break. So you have to like go into etcd and delete it manually, going with the etcd client. So the answer here is etcd client and delete manually. So we did that. We did the create multi versions, and then Prometheus metrics. So this one is, let me show this. This section is the one that talks about component config. I'm skipping because that had been deprecated. And so in the book, there's not much else. Multi-version we did. Component config is deprecated. Migration, this talks about migrating from KubeBuilder versions. We don't have to do that since we use the latest version. Yeah, and I think that's it. The section that I'm talking about right now is metrics. So if your main.go has metrics already, so we can see metrics about how your controller is behaving, and that comes from this package, runtime package metrics. These are Prometheus metrics that get exposed on the endpoint, and it's a matter of having something like OpenTelemetry or Prometheus to scrape those metrics and then send them somewhere, and then maybe you can have Grafana to see it. So this section explains like that if you install Prometheus, when you scaffold this, it gives you a Prometheus service monitor. So if you go to the default customization, you uncomment this line to include this folder, the Prometheus folder. Inside the customization, there's monitor, and this is a Prometheus monitor that it will scrape your, and then when you do make manifest, it puts the right namespace that you're deploying your controller. It's going to scrape /metrics on the HTTPS, and it will find all the services that have this label, and then it will start collecting metrics, start scraping. So I already did that. If I do like make manifest, well, make install is deployed that. So if I do get service, I'm typing down here, service monitor, and then you put -n KubeBuilder, where I'm deploying it into, it gets deployed into the same KubeBuilder, and I put service Yeah, but that was the name of this service monitor. Name is this one. KubeBuilder, Book Club, Controller, and then Dash, Manager, Matrix. So the other ones are those are like service monitors from Prometheus installation. Ours is this one. So I can do KubeBuilder. It's just I install Prometheus in the same thing. So I added the nodes. If you look into nodes.md, basically the way I install for monitoring, I did a Helm upgrade install of the Prometheus stack using values.yaml. And then values.yaml, I put false to service monitor selector nil uses Helm values, and that would allow a service monitor outside Prometheus to do it. So you can install Prometheus anywhere. So if we do this, is there? This is the same information that we did. -o YAML, and that's the Prometheus I was showing here. That's the monitor that got installed. And then if we want to see the metrics, so this is what it's saying that is deployed running. If you want to see the metrics, then you can open the Prometheus UI, which you can go into the HackMD and then run like this line. I'm going to expose it on Prometheus on port 8080. And it's exposed, and then I can open a new window here, localhost 8080, and then I can do something like controller runtime, I don't know, max reconcile concurrent, any of the metrics that are they explain here. I'll go, when you go to the book, where does he have the list? These are the metrics, Prometheus metrics that you can get, like work queue duration seconds. So how long does it take your controller to manage? If you have a lot of resource CRs to handle, work queue retries total, REST client request totals, controller runtime. So all these show up, active workers in terms of Go routines. So all of them show up in Prometheus. So if we go back to Prometheus, they're here: work queue, duration, retries total, right? Something like that. Execute it, and you see, and then you put that the namespace equals KubeBuilder book club, right? And that's where it's located. So this is our 380, and then if you want to graph it, this is how you get the graph. So that's Prometheus. All the data is in Prometheus, and then the next thing that they have is Grafana. So there's a plugin for Grafana dashboard. So Grafana is there. So if you enable Grafana, I think they show it in the book here. Where is it? In the book, I think there was a section on Grafana. I mean, it was maybe the previous one, but there's a section in Grafana that there's a plugin. If you go plugin, and there's one for Grafana, so you can enable this, and then it will give you the metrics. So if you do this command, I ran this command, init plugin Grafana edit. I was able to get a Grafana folder here, and there's like example of dashboards for your controller. So it creates 2 of them. So let's see how Grafana looks like before we end. So if I go to hack nodes.md and I run Grafana, the Grafana line, I'll run in the same port, 8080. I go to the browser, localhost 8080. I log in, the password is in the notes, and then it creates this. I created these two dashboards with the JSON files. Basically, I just did dashboard import, copy paste the JSON, and created one for resources metrics. So you can see here how much CPU is your controller consuming, how much memory is consuming over time. So that's just a nice example of a dashboard that it generates. It's a starting point. And then the other one that KubeBuilder gives you is dashboard runtime metrics. And this is kind of like the interesting one, right? How is your controller performing? Like how much CPU and memory you're giving it to the controller or limiting the controller to do. Controllers are something that are not horizontal scale. So you have to vertically scale them, giving them more memory and CPU because it's one pod doing all the work. There's projects, for example, Knative, we have something that we can shard controllers. So you can horizontally scale and divide and shard the resources, but normally is vertical. You give it more memory and CPU. And if things are running slow, this is something that I use a lot in Crossplane because Crossplane has a bunch of CRDs, one controller doing a lot of work. So you can see like if it takes time to deploy your like AWS resources or cloud resources. In this case, our cron jobs, if it takes a while to run the cron job, or it's always running late, or it's not running on time, then you can look up like what's the work queue, how long does it take, how many reconciliations, rate limiting, reconciliation errors, all that data that comes from the other metrics that were in the table. So this is Grafana out of the box, working with KubeBuilder when you build your controller. So monitoring. So when people ask, how do I monitor X? And the X is an add-on, the controller, Istio is whatever. Most of them come out of the box with metrics. So you scrape them. There's similar metrics for all of them in terms of Kubernetes controllers. These are common ones. Even the ones that are inside Kubernetes that come with Kubernetes, the scheduler, the control manager, Kube API, all of them have metrics, and they are exposing the Go information that is inside the Go through the instrumentation of the metrics. I think that's it that I wanted to show. Let me go back to I think I had the book club notes here. Cover how to do Prometheus on that controller, and we cover how to do Grafana on that controller. And that's it. I mean, I think it took us like 4 sessions to go over this book for KubeBuilder, but next week we'll start the new book, Acing the Kubernetes exam. Any questions, comments, feedback? This is recorded, so if you want to also and the last thing I will do later, but just I need to do my changes and session, and then I'll push this one to I'll push it also to main, git push origin. I think this is I'll merge it to main and then push it to main, but it's in the playground playground 2 in the repo. So I'll merge this after I end. And before we go, yeah, join us next week. We meet Thursdays and Fridays. Thursday we're doing production Kubernetes, and then Fridays we'll be doing acing the CKA exam with Chad, the book author, will do some sessions. Eric will do sessions. I will do a session, and then Sevi will do another session. And hopefully by the end of this year, a lot of people will get their CKA certification. If there's nothing else, I'll stop the recording.
Thanks, Carlos.